The morning sun cast long shadows across the small gun range on the outskirts of Denver, Colorado. General Marcus Hartwell had driven past this place 100 times on his way to the Veterans Hospital, where he volunteered twice a month. He never paid much attention to it before. The faded sign reading Rocky Mountain Firearms Training had become just another piece of background scenery in his retired life. But on this particular Tuesday in late September, something made him pull over. Marcus had been a general for the last 8 years of his military career, but before that, he had spent 20 years climbing through the ranks, leading men and women through some of the most dangerous operations the country had ever undertaken. Now, at 62, with silver hair and the kind of weathered face that told stories without words, he spent his days trying to find peace in a world that felt too quiet compared to the life he once knew. He had stopped because he needed coffee. The small cafe next to the gun range advertised fresh brew and homemade pastries. His wife Sarah had been on him about his coffee consumption, but she was visiting their daughter in Boston for the week, which meant he could indulge a little. As he walked toward the cafe, he heard the distinct sound of gunfire from the range. It was a sound that would make most people uncomfortable, but to Marcus, it was oddly comforting. It reminded him of discipline, of focus, of purpose. The cafe was nearly empty. A young couple sat in the corner, whispering over their phones. An elderly man read a newspaper by the window. Marcus ordered his coffee and a blueberry muffin, then took a seat where he could see outside. The range was visible from where he sat, separated by a chain-link fence and about 50 yards of gravel parking lot. That was when he saw her. She was alone at one of the outdoor stations, methodically cleaning a rifle. Even from a distance, Marcus could tell she knew what she was doing. Her movements were precise, practiced, almost ritualistic. She couldn't have been more than 35, with dark hair pulled back in a tight ponytail. She wore a simple black t-shirt and jeans, but something about her posture reminded him of soldiers he had known. Marcus found himself watching her, not in a creepy way, but with the kind of professional curiosity that had served him well during his military career. He had always been good at reading people, at seeing beyond the surface. This woman had military training. He was certain of it. She finished cleaning the rifle and set it aside, then pulled out a handgun. She checked it, cleaned it, moved through the process with the kind of efficiency that only came from doing something thousands of times. Marcus took a sip of his coffee, still watching. He told himself he should look away, mind his own business, but something kept his attention fixed on her. Then she stood up and turned slightly, reaching for something on the bench beside her. That was when Marcus saw her arm. She had pushed up her sleeve, probably because of the warm morning sun, and there on her left forearm was a tattoo. From where he sat, he could not make out the details, but he could see enough to know it was military-related. His heart rate picked up slightly. He had seen a lot of military tattoos over the years. Unit insignias, dates, coordinates, names of fallen comrades. They all told stories. Marcus stood up, leaving his half-eaten muffin on the table. He walked out of the cafe and toward the fence that separated the parking lot from the gun range. He knew he was being strange, knew this was not normal behavior, but something was pulling him forward. The woman had sat back down and was now reassembling the handgun. She had not noticed him. As he got closer, the tattoo became clearer. His breath caught in his throat. His hands gripped the chain-link fence. It could not be. It was impossible. The tattoo was an eagle with spread wings, clutching a shield. Beneath it were numbers. The 7th of April 2011. And below that, a single word in script lettering. Jackal. Marcus felt like the ground had disappeared beneath him. His vision blurred for a moment. He had to grip the fence tighter to steady himself. Operation Jackal. 4th of July, 2011. He had not heard those words spoken aloud in over a decade. He had not seen that symbol since the day he had ordered the mission files sealed and classified at the highest level. The woman looked up suddenly, as if sensing she was being watched. Her eyes met Marcus's through the fence. They were dark brown, almost black, and they held the kind of hardness that came from seeing things no person should have to see. For a moment, neither of them moved. They just stared at each other across the distance. Then recognition flickered across her face. It was subtle, just a slight widening of her eyes, a tiny intake of breath. She knew who he was. Or at least, she knew what he represented. Marcus found his voice. "I need to talk to you." The woman did not respond immediately. She set down the handgun carefully, deliberately, keeping her movements slow and controlled. When she finally spoke, her voice was rough, like she did not use it much. "I don't think that's a good idea, sir." The way she said, "sir," told Marcus everything he needed to know. She had been military. She knew rank, she knew protocol, and she knew who he was. "Please," Marcus said, and he hated how desperate he sounded. "That tattoo. I need to know where you got it. I need to know what you know." The woman stood up fully now. She was tall, maybe 5'9", with a lean, athletic build. She crossed her arms over her chest, and Marcus saw that the tattoo continued further up her arm than he had initially thought. There was more to it, more symbols, more meaning. "You should leave," she said quietly. "You should forget you saw me. Forget you saw this." She gestured to her arm. "I can't do that," Marcus replied. His mind was racing. Operation Jackal had been his mission, his command. He had sent 17 soldiers into the mountains of Afghanistan on what was supposed to be a routine extraction. Only 12 had come back. The other 5 were listed as killed in action. Their bodies never recovered. The mission had gone so wrong, so catastrophically off the rails, that it had been buried deep in classified files. The families had been told their loved ones died heroes, but they were never told the whole truth. No one was ever told the whole truth. And now here was this woman with that name, that date, tattooed on her arm like a memorial. "Who are you?" Marcus asked. "Were you part of Jackal? I thought I knew everyone on that mission." The woman laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You thought a lot of things, General. Most of them were wrong." She began packing up her weapons, moving quickly now. Marcus realized she was preparing to leave. If he let her go, he might never get answers to questions that had haunted him for 13 years. "Wait!" he called out. He looked around frantically, then spotted the gate entrance to the range about 20 yards away. He ran for it, his 62-year-old knees protesting but carrying him forward anyway. By the time he reached the gate and got through, the woman had her rifle case slung over her shoulder and was heading toward a beaten-up Ford truck parked in the corner of the lot. "Please," Marcus said again, jogging to catch up with her. "I'm not here in any official capacity. I'm retired. I need to understand. 5 men died on that mission. I've lived with that weight for 13 years. If you know something, anything, you have to tell me." The woman stopped walking. She did not turn around, but she stopped. Her shoulders tensed, and Marcus could see her hands clench into fists. For a long moment, she just stood there, frozen. Then she turned around slowly, and Marcus saw that her eyes were wet. She was not crying, not exactly, but there were tears there, held back by sheer force of will. 5 men didn't die, General," she said, and her voice cracked on the last word. 6 people died, but you wouldn't know about the 6th because she wasn't supposed to be there. Because she didn't officially exist. Because you and everyone else pretended she was never part of that mission at all. Marcus felt his blood run cold. "What are you talking about?" The woman took a step closer to him. "My name is Elena Reeves. Does that name mean anything to you?" Marcus searched his memory. Reeves. There had been a Sergeant Daniel Reeves on the mission. He had been one of the 12 who came back. He had left the military 2 years after Jackal, and no one had heard from him since. "Daniel Reeves," Marcus said. "He was on the mission. He survived." "He was my brother," Elena said. "And he didn't survive. Not really. He came back, yeah, but he was broken, completely shattered by what he saw, what he had to do. He drank himself to death 3 years after he got home. Liver failure at 31 years old." Marcus felt sick. He had not known. After soldiers left the military, he lost track of most of them. He should have followed up. He should have checked on them. "I'm sorry," he said, and he meant it. "I didn't know." "Of course you didn't know," Elena said bitterly. "You generals never know what happens to us after. We're just numbers in your reports. Mission complete. Acceptable losses. Move on to the next operation." "That's not fair," Marcus started to say, but Elena cut him off. "Isn't it? Let me tell you what my brother told me before he died, General. Let me tell you what really happened on Operation Jackal. Because the official story is a lie, the whole thing is a lie. And 6 people died because of that lie, including someone you never even knew existed. Marcus stared at her. His mind was reeling. Who was the 6th person? Elena touched her tattoo, running her fingers over the eagle and the numbers. Her name was Lieutenant Sara Castellano. She was an intelligence officer attached to the mission at the last minute. She was my best friend. We went through basic together, deployed together, survived 2 tours in Iraq together. She was supposed to be doing back-end intel analysis from the base, but something changed 48 hours before the mission launched. Suddenly, she was added to the team going into the mountains. My brother told me Sarah was terrified, said she had bad intel about the mission, said something was wrong. I never authorized any intelligence officer to deploy with that unit, Marcus said firmly. The team was all combat specialists, no analysts in the field. That's what I'm trying to tell you, Elena said, her voice rising. The mission was changed. Someone above you, someone with more authority, modified the operation. They sent Sara in there with bad equipment and worse intel. And when everything went to hell, when the ambush happened and people started dying, they scrubbed her from the records completely. Like she was never there. Like she never existed. Marcus shook his head. That's impossible. I would have known. I was the commanding officer. No one could have changed my mission parameters without me knowing. Elena laughed again. That same hollow, broken sound. You really believe that? You think you know everything that happens in the military? My brother spent his last coherent moments before the alcohol took his mind, completely trying to tell me what happened. He said Sarah was carrying something, some kind of data device. He said that was the real mission. The extraction was just a cover. And when the ambush happened, when the enemy somehow knew exactly where they would be and when they would be there, Sarah was the first one they killed. They took the device from her body and disappeared into the mountains. Marcus felt like he was falling. This could not be true. His mission had been straightforward. Extract a foreign intelligence asset from a hostile region and bring him back for debriefing. It had gone wrong when they were ambushed 3 clicks from the extraction point. 5 men had died in the firefight. The asset had been killed. The survivors had barely made it out. It had been a tragedy, but a straightforward one. These things happened in war. But if what Elena was saying was true, then nothing about that mission had been straightforward. It had been compromised from the start, and someone had used his authority to hide the truth. Why are you telling me this? Marcus asked quietly. Why now after all these years? Elena looked at him with those hard, dark eyes. Because my brother is dead. Because Sarah is dead. Because 5 other soldiers are dead. And because whoever was responsible for all of that is still out there. Probably sitting in some comfortable office, living a nice life, while we all carry the weight of what they did. I've been searching for answers for years, General. I left the military. I've dedicated my entire life to finding out the truth. And that tattoo? She held up her arm. That's my reminder. Every single day I look at this, and I remember that Sarah died for nothing. That my brother drank himself to death because he could not live with what he saw. That's my reminder to never stop looking. Marcus felt old suddenly. Older than his 62 years. He thought about all the missions he had commanded. All the decisions he had made. All the lives that had been changed or ended because of orders he had given. He had always believed he was doing the right thing, serving his country, protecting his people. But what if he had been a pawn in someone else's game? What if his entire career had been built on lies? What do you want from me? He asked. Elena picked up her rifle case and swung it into the bed of her truck. I want you to help me find the truth. I want you to use whatever connections you still have, whatever authority you still carry, to get me the real files from Operation Jackal. Not the sanitized version, the real one. And I want to know who gave the order to put Sarah on that mission, and who gave the order to erase her from existence after she died. Those files are classified, Marcus said automatically. Even if I wanted to help, I don't have access anymore. Then get access, Elena said flatly. You were a general. You know people. You have friends in high places. Use them. Marcus was silent for a long moment. He knew what Elena was asking was dangerous. Digging into classified operations, especially ones that had been deliberately buried, could end badly for everyone involved. He could lose his pension, his reputation, even his freedom if he was not careful. And for what? To chase the ghost of a mission that happened 13 years ago? To potentially uncover a conspiracy that might not even exist? But then he thought about those 5 men whose names were on a memorial wall somewhere. He thought about Daniel Reeves drinking himself to death at 31. He thought about Lieutenant Sarah Castellano, who had apparently been erased from history. And he thought about the possibility that he had been used, that his command had been hijacked for purposes he never understood. "If I do this," Marcus said slowly, "and if we find out that you're right, that there was a conspiracy, that someone deliberately sabotaged the mission, what then? What are you planning to do with that information?" Elena looked at him steadily. "Whatever it takes to get justice. Whatever it takes to make sure Sarah and my brother and all the others didn't die for nothing. Whatever it takes to make the people responsible pay for what they did." There was something in her voice, a cold determination that made Marcus uneasy. This woman had been living with rage and grief for years. She was not looking for closure. She was looking for revenge. "I need time to think about this," Marcus said. "You've had 13 years to think," Elena replied. She pulled out a piece of paper and scribbled something on it, then handed it to Marcus. "That's my number. You have 48 hours to decide. After that, I'm doing this on my own, and I won't be so careful about covering my tracks. Which means if there really is a conspiracy, the people involved will know someone is digging, and then we'll both be in danger." She climbed into her truck and started the engine. The old Ford roared to life with a cloud of black smoke. Marcus stood there holding the piece of paper, watching as she drove away. When the truck disappeared down the road, he looked down at the number she had written. Below it, she had written one more thing. "They died for the truth. Don't let them die for nothing." Marcus folded the paper carefully and put it in his pocket. Then he walked back to his car, his coffee and muffin completely forgotten. His hands were shaking as he gripped the steering wheel. His mind was already racing through possibilities, through contacts he could reach out to, through databases he might still be able to access. He had told himself when he retired that he was done with secrets, done with the darkness that came with military intelligence and classified operations. He had promised Sarah that he would enjoy his retirement, that he would focus on their grandchildren and his volunteer work, and maybe take up golf. But now Elena Reeves had walked into his life with her tattoo, and her story, and her burning need for answers, and Marcus realized that he could not walk away. Not from this. Not if there was even a chance she was telling the truth. As he drove home, Marcus made a decision. He would look into it, carefully, quietly, using every bit of discretion he had learned over 30 years in the military. He would find out what really happened to Operation Jackal. He would find out if Lieutenant Sarah Castellano really existed and really died on that mission. And if someone had deliberately sent those soldiers into an ambush, if someone had erased a dead officer from the records, then Marcus would make sure they faced justice. Even if it destroyed everything he had built, even if it cost him everything, because Elena was right about one thing. The dead deserved the truth, and the living deserved to know what they had really died for. Marcus pulled into his driveway and sat there for a moment, engine off, just staring at his house. It looked so peaceful, so normal. Sarah's flower garden was blooming. The American flag hung from the porch. Everything about this place spoke of a quiet, honorable retirement. But Marcus knew that peace was about to be shattered. The moment he started pulling at the threads of Operation Jackal, everything would change. There would be no going back. He pulled out his phone and dialed a number he had not called in 5 years. It rang 3 times before a gruff voice answered. "This is a surprise, Marcus. I thought you were done with all this." "I thought so too, Jim," Marcus replied. "But something's come up. Something from the past. I need your help." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "This is about a classified operation, isn't it?" "Yes." Another pause. "How classified?" "Top secret. Sealed files, the kind that end careers if you dig too deep." Jim sighed. "When do you want to meet?" "Tomorrow morning, early. And Jim? Come alone. Trust no one else with this." "That bad, huh?" "Potentially worse than bad. This could go all the way to the top." "I'll be there." "Same place as always?" "Same place," Marcus confirmed. "And Jim, thank you." Don't thank me yet. We don't even know what we're walking into. Marcus ended the call and sat in his car for a few more minutes, gathering his thoughts. Then he went inside, poured himself a scotch he definitely did not need, and began making a list of everyone he knew who might be able to help him access files from 2011. It was going to be a long night. Marcus barely slept that night. He kept seeing Elena's face, kept hearing her words. 6 people died. One of them didn't exist. By 3 in the morning, he had given up on sleep entirely and moved to his study, where he kept his old military files, the ones he had been allowed to take when he retired. He knew Operation Jackal would not be in there, but maybe there would be something else, some clue he had missed. At 6 in the morning, he showered, dressed in casual clothes, and left a note for Sarah, even though she would not be back until next week. Old habits. Always let someone know where you were going, even if they were hundreds of miles away. He wrote that he was meeting an old friend for breakfast and might be gone most of the day. The meeting place was a diner on the edge of town, the kind of place where truckers stopped for coffee and eggs before hitting the highway. It was neutral ground, somewhere no one would think twice about seeing 2 old military men having a meal together. Marcus arrived first and took a booth in the back corner where he could see both entrances. Another old habit. Always watch the doors. Jim walked in at 7:30 exactly. He was Marcus's age, maybe a year younger, with a completely bald head and a thick gray beard. He had been a colonel when Marcus knew him, working in military intelligence. After retirement, he had taken a consulting job with a defense contractor, which meant he still had access to certain databases and certain people that Marcus did not. They shook hands and Jim slid into the booth across from Marcus. A tired waitress came by and they both ordered coffee and the breakfast special. Neither of them spoke until she walked away. "So," Jim said quietly, leaning forward, "tell me what's got you spooked enough to drag me out here at dawn." Marcus told him everything, about stopping at the gun range, about seeing Elena Reeves, about the tattoo, about her story of a 6th casualty who had been erased from the records. Jim listened without interrupting, his face growing more serious with each detail. When Marcus finished, Jim sat back and let out a long breath. "That's heavy, Marcus. You realize if even half of what she said is true, you're talking about a massive cover-up. Multiple felonies, possibly treason, depending on what that data device was for." "I know," Marcus said. "That's why I called you. I need to know if this Castellano woman existed. I need to see the real mission files, not the sanitized version." Jim rubbed his beard thoughtfully. "Lieutenant Sara Castellano. Let me make a call." He pulled out his phone and stepped outside. Marcus watched through the window as Jim paced back and forth on the sidewalk, phone pressed to his ear. The conversation lasted about 5 minutes. When Jim came back, his expression was troubled. "Well?" Marcus asked. "She existed," Jim said simply. "Sarah Marie Castellano. Commissioned as a 2nd lieutenant in 2008. Promoted to 1st lieutenant in 2010. Army intelligence. Served in Iraq, then Afghanistan. Her file says she died in a training accident at Bagram Air Base on July 6, 2011. Marcus felt his stomach drop. 2 days after Operation Jackal. Exactly 2 days after, Jim confirmed. And here's the thing, Marcus. Her death was investigated by military police. The report says she fell from a communications tower during routine maintenance. Accidental death. Closed case. But I had my guy check the details, and there are some weird things. First, she was not a communications specialist. Why would an intelligence officer be doing maintenance on a tower? Second, there were no witnesses to the fall. The body was found by a patrol that morning. Third, and this is the kicker, she was cremated within 48 hours and her ashes were sent to a family plot in New Mexico. No military funeral, no honors, nothing. "Someone cleaned it up," Marcus said. "They killed her on the mission, realized they had to account for her body somehow, staged a training accident." "That would be the obvious conclusion," Jim agreed. "But it's also incredibly risky. A lot of people would have to be involved in a cover-up like that. The MP investigators, the medical examiner, whoever signed off on the cremation. We're talking about at least a dozen people who would have to keep the secret. Or a dozen people who were ordered to keep the secret by someone with enough authority that they didn't ask questions," Marcus said. "You know how it works, Jim." When someone high enough up the chain says something is a matter of national security and orders you to do something, you do it. You don't ask why. You don't dig deeper. You follow orders and you keep your mouth shut. Jim nodded slowly. What about the brother? Daniel Reeves? I remember him, Marcus said. Good soldier, solid performance. He came back from Jackal quiet, withdrawn. I thought it was just combat stress. We offered him counseling. He declined. When his enlistment was up, he left. I never saw him again. And now I find out he drank himself to death. There's more, Jim said. I had my contact pull Daniel Reeves's medical records from his time after Jackal. He was hospitalized twice for alcohol-related issues. Both times, the intake notes mention that he was extremely agitated, talking about classified operations, claiming that people had died and no one cared. The doctors diagnosed him with severe PTSD and recommended long-term psychiatric care. He refused treatment. Marcus closed his eyes. He was trying to tell people what happened and they thought he was crazy. Or someone made sure people thought he was crazy, Jim said darkly. Look, Marcus, I've been doing this work long enough to know when something smells wrong, and this smells very wrong, but we need to be smart about how we proceed. If there really is a cover-up, and if it goes as high as we think it might, then digging into this could put both of us in danger. What are you suggesting? I'm suggesting we need to be very careful about what we access and how we access it. We need to cover our tracks. We need to make sure that if someone is monitoring these files, they don't realize we're looking at them. Marcus appreciated Jim's caution, but he also felt a burning urgency. Elena had given him 48 hours, and he was already down to 40. Can you get the Operation Jackal files or not? Jim hesitated. I can try. I have a friend at the National Archives who owes me a favor. But Marcus, these are sealed files. Even if we get them, they're going to be heavily redacted. And the act of requesting them might trigger alerts. Do it anyway, Marcus said. Whatever the risk, I need to see those files. Jim studied him for a long moment. This matters to you, more than just the mission. Why? Marcus thought about how to answer that. Because I've spent my whole career believing I was doing the right thing, believing I was serving something bigger than myself. And if Elena is right, if I was used as a pawn in someone else's game, if soldiers under my command died because someone manipulated my operation for their own purposes, then everything I believed about my service was a lie, and I need to know the truth, even if it destroys me. Jim nodded. All right, I'll make the call. But Marcus, promise me something. If we find out this is as bad as it looks, we don't try to handle it ourselves. We take it to someone we can trust. Someone with the authority to do something about it. Who would that be? Marcus asked bitterly. If this goes high enough, who can we trust? I don't know yet, Jim admitted. But we'll figure it out, one step at a time. They finished their breakfast in relative silence, both men lost in thought. When they parted ways in the parking lot, Jim promised to call within 24 hours. Marcus drove home feeling slightly better. At least he was not alone in this anymore. At least someone else believed him, believed Elena. Back at his house, Marcus spent the rest of the day going through his old files, looking for anything related to the personnel who had been on Operation Jackal. He found performance reviews, commendations, and after-action reports from other missions. He made notes on each soldier, trying to build a picture of who they were and what they had experienced. The 5 who died were Sergeant Thomas Brennan, Corporal Luis Ramirez, Private First Class Michael Chen, Staff Sergeant Kevin O'Malley, and Specialist Andrew Garza. Good men, all of them. Men with families, with futures that were cut short. Marcus had written letters to each of their families, carefully worded letters that praised their service and offered condolences but revealed nothing about the true nature of their mission. The 12 who came back included Daniel Reeves, but also men like Captain John Foster, who had led the team on the ground, and Sergeant First Class Robert Hayes, who had been the most experienced soldier in the unit. Marcus wondered what they knew, what they had seen. Were they carrying the same burden Daniel Reeves had carried? Were they living with the knowledge that the mission had been compromised? He made a list of names and began searching for them online. Foster had retired from the military and now worked as a security consultant in Virginia. Hayes had left the Army and became a police officer in Texas. Others had scattered across the country, pursuing different careers, different lives. Marcus wondered if any of them would talk to him. And if they did, what would they say? His phone rang at 4 in the afternoon. It was Elena. "Have you made a decision?" she asked without preamble. "I'm working on it," Marcus said. "I have someone looking into the files right now. I need more time." "You don't have more time," Elena said, and there was an edge to her voice. "I told you. 48 hours. That's all you get." "Why the deadline?" Marcus asked. "Why the urgency?" Elena was quiet for a moment. "Because I'm not the only one looking into this, General. There are other people, dangerous people, who know about Operation Jackal. And they're not going to be happy if they find out I'm digging around. The longer I wait, the more risk I'm in. So either you help me or you don't. But I need to know now." "What do you mean other people are looking into this? I've been doing this for years, remember? Asking questions, following leads. About 6 months ago, I started noticing things. My apartment was broken into, but nothing was stolen. My car was tampered with. Small things. Things that could be accidents, but probably weren't. And then I started seeing the same vehicles following me. Different plates, different models, but always there. Someone knows I'm investigating Jackal, and they're watching me." Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. "You're being surveilled." "That's my guess," Elena said, "which means we're running out of time. If they think I'm getting close to something, they might decide to do more than just watch. They might decide to silence me permanently." "Come to my house," Marcus said suddenly. "Right now. If you're in danger, you shouldn't be alone. I can protect you." Elena laughed. "With respect, General, you're 62 years old. What are you going to do against professional operatives?" "I'm not dead yet," Marcus said firmly. "And I still have friends, resources. Please, Elena. If what you're saying is true, you need backup." There was a long pause. "All right," Elena finally said. "Send me your address. I'll be there in an hour." Marcus gave her the address and then immediately called Jim. "We have a problem," he said when Jim answered. "Elena Reeves thinks she's being watched. She says people have been following her, breaking into her apartment." "That's not good," Jim said. "If someone is actively surveilling her, then they probably know she met with you, which means you might be compromised too. Can you come over? She's on her way here now. I think we need to pool our resources, figure out who might be behind this." "I'll be there in 30 minutes, Jim said. "And Marcus? Check your house for bugs before she arrives. If they're watching her, they might have already moved on to watching you." Marcus had not even thought of that. As soon as he hung up, he began searching his house. He was not an expert in surveillance equipment, but he had received basic training years ago. He checked phones, light fixtures, smoke detectors. He did not find anything obvious, but that did not mean the house was clean. Modern surveillance devices could be incredibly small and well hidden. Jim arrived first, carrying a small black bag. "Anti-surveillance kit," he explained, pulling out what looked like a small radio. "It'll detect most common bugs and cameras. Let's sweep the place." They spent 20 minutes going through every room. The device beeped 3 times, once in Marcus's study, once in the living room, and once in the master bedroom. Jim carefully extracted 3 tiny devices, each no bigger than a button, and placed them in a signal-blocking pouch. "Someone's been in your house," Jim said grimly. "These are military grade. Whoever planted them knew what they were doing." Marcus felt violated. His home, his sanctuary, had been invaded. When could they have done this? "Any time you weren't here," Jim said. "Could have been yesterday. Could have been a week ago. These things have long battery lives." Elena arrived while they were finishing the sweep. Marcus let her in quickly, checking the street before closing the door. She looked tired, wary, like an animal that had been hunted too long. Marcus introduced her to Jim, and the 3 of them sat down at the kitchen table. Jim laid out the surveillance devices he had found. "We're all compromised," he said bluntly. "Marcus's house was bugged, which means whoever is running this operation knows you came here, Elena. They probably have recordings of every conversation Marcus has had in his house for at least the past week." Elena nodded like this was not a surprise. "Then we need to assume they know everything we know. They know we're investigating Jackal. They know we're looking for the truth. Which means they're going to try to stop us," Marcus said. "The question is how and when." "And who they are," Jim added. We need to figure out who has the resources and motivation to run a surveillance operation like this. We're not talking about some rogue agent. We're talking about an organization with serious funding and serious reach. Elena pulled out her phone and opened a folder full of photos and documents. I've been compiling evidence for years. Let me show you what I have. For the next 2 hours, Elena walked them through her investigation. She had tracked down 6 of the 12 survivors from Operation Jackal and interviewed them. 3 had refused to talk to her at all. 2 had given her vague statements that confirmed things had gone wrong but would not provide details. 1, a former private named Jackson Mills, had been more forthcoming. Mills had told Elena that the mission had been strange from the start. The intelligence brief had been delivered at the last minute, leaving no time for proper planning. The extraction point had been changed twice in the 24 hours before they deployed, and when they arrived at the target location, it had felt like a trap from the moment they stepped off the helicopter. Mills said the ambush was too perfect, Elena explained. The enemy knew exactly where they would be, and exactly when they would be there. He said it felt like they had been sold out, like someone had given the enemy their entire operation plan. Did Mills mention Sara Castellano? Marcus asked. Elena nodded. He did. He said there was a woman with them, an officer he did not recognize. He said she was carrying a metal case, something that looked important. When the ambush started, the enemy fighters went straight for her. They killed her first, took the case, and then retreated. Mills said the whole firefight only lasted about 10 minutes. The enemy got what they wanted and left. The 5 soldiers who died were killed trying to recover Sara's body and the case. Jesus, Jim muttered. So the mission was a trap. The enemy knew about the data device, knew Sara would be carrying it. They ambushed the team, specifically to kill her and take it. But who set up the trap? Marcus asked. Who had access to the mission plans? Who could have leaked that information to the enemy? That's what I've been trying to figure out, Elena said. Mills didn't know. He was just a grunt following orders. But he said Captain Foster, the team leader, was furious when they got back to base. Mills heard Foster screaming at someone over the radio, demanding to know who authorized the mission changes, who had compromised their position. And then Foster was suddenly transferred to a different unit within 48 hours. Mills never saw him again. Marcus leaned forward. I remember that. Foster requested an immediate transfer, said he could not work under the current command structure anymore. I approved it because he seemed extremely distressed and I thought he needed a change of scenery. But now I'm wondering if he was trying to get away from something. Or someone. We need to talk to Foster, Jim said. If he knows who compromised the mission, he's our best lead. I've tried, Elena said. Multiple times. He won't return my calls, won't answer emails. I drove to his house in Virginia 2 months ago and he threatened to call the police if I did not leave. He'll talk to me, Marcus said with more confidence than he felt. I was his commanding officer. He owes me that much. Jim was studying the documents Elena had spread out on the table. There's something else here. Look at this. He pointed to a memo Elena had somehow obtained from the Pentagon. This is a logistics report from July 2011. It shows that a special operations team was deployed to the same region as Operation Jackal, but on a completely different mission. The timing overlaps almost exactly. What kind of special operations team? Marcus asked. It doesn't say. The details are redacted. But the funding came from a black budget line, which means it was probably CIA or some other intelligence agency. You think the CIA was involved? Elena asked. I think someone in the intelligence community set up Operation Jackal as a cover for something else, Jim said slowly. Think about it. You send in a regular army unit on what looks like a routine mission. The real objective is to deliver this data device to the enemy, maybe as part of some larger operation. You attach an intelligence officer to carry the device, someone expendable, someone who can be erased if things go wrong. The army team is just window dressing, there to make it look legitimate. But something goes sideways. People die who weren't supposed to die, and suddenly you have a mess that needs to be cleaned up. Marcus felt sick. You're saying my mission was a front, that I was used to facilitate some kind of intelligence operation without my knowledge. That's exactly what I'm saying, Jim replied. And if I'm right, then the people behind this are still out there, still in positions of power, which is why they're so desperate to keep the truth buried. Elena stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the quiet suburban street. So what do? We can't go to the authorities because we don't know who we can trust. We can't publish what we know because we don't have hard proof, and we're being watched, which means they know we're getting close. We get proof, Marcus said. We track down Foster and make him talk. We get the Operation Jackal files from the archives. We build a case so solid that even the people who covered this up can't deny it. And then what? Elena asked, turning to face him. What happens when we have the proof? You think anyone will care? You think some newspaper is going to run a story about a classified operation from 13 years ago? You think Congress is going to hold hearings? They'll bury it again, Marcus. They'll call us conspiracy theorists, discredit us, maybe even arrest us for revealing classified information. So what's your alternative? Marcus challenged. Give up? Let Sarah and your brother and the others die for nothing? I won't accept that. Elena's eyes flashed. I never said give up. I said we need to be realistic about what justice looks like. Maybe it doesn't look like congressional hearings and newspaper headlines. Maybe it looks like finding the people who did this and making them pay in other ways. Jim stood up. Let's not get ahead of ourselves. First things first. Marcus, you contact Foster. Elena, you keep compiling your evidence, but be careful. Assume you're being watched at all times. I'll work on getting the Jackal files from my contact at the archives. We meet back here in 48 hours and compare notes. Nobody does anything stupid or dangerous in the meantime. Agreed? Marcus nodded. Elena hesitated, then nodded as well. As they were preparing to leave, Jim pulled Marcus aside. Watch her, he said quietly, nodding toward Elena. She's angry. She's been carrying this for years. I'm worried about what she might do if she gets the chance. She wants justice, Marcus said. She wants revenge, Jim corrected. And there's a difference. Justice is about the truth coming out, about accountability through proper channels. Revenge is about making someone suffer because you've suffered. Don't let her cross that line, Marcus. Because once she does, we all become criminals. And everything we're trying to accomplish falls apart. Marcus knew Jim was right, but he also understood Elena's rage. He had felt it himself, looking at the pictures of the 5 dead soldiers, thinking about Daniel Reeves drinking himself to death. Sometimes the system failed. Sometimes justice through proper channels was impossible. And sometimes people had to take matters into their own hands. But he did not say any of that to Jim. He just nodded and promised to be careful. After they left, Marcus sat alone in his kitchen, looking at the surveillance devices Jim had found. Someone had been listening to him, watching him, invading his privacy and his life. And that someone was probably listening right now, either through devices they had not found or through other means. Marcus stood up and walked to the window. He stared out at the street, looking for suspicious vehicles, for people who did not belong. He did not see anything obvious, but he knew they were out there somewhere, watching, waiting. He picked up his phone and called Captain John Foster. It rang 4 times before going to voicemail. Marcus left a message. Foster, this is General Hartwell. I know you don't want to talk about Operation Jackal, but I need you to call me back. It's important. People died on that mission, and I'm starting to think there's more to the story than what's in the official reports. You owe it to the men you served with to help me find the truth. Call me. He hung up and immediately wondered if that was a mistake. If Foster was being watched too, that message might have just put him in danger. But it was too late now. Marcus spent the rest of the evening researching Sarah Castellano. He found her college records, her commissioning paperwork, photos from her time in Iraq. She had been a real person with a real life, and someone had erased her from history like she never existed. That was what made Marcus angriest. Not just that she had died, but that her death had been covered up so thoroughly that her family probably had no idea what really happened to her. At 11 o'clock that night, his phone rang. Unknown number. Marcus answered carefully. General Hartwell? Yes. Who is this? This is Captain Foster. The voice was rough, strained. You called me earlier. About Jackal. I did, Marcus said, sitting up straight. Thank you for calling back. I know this is difficult, but I need to ask you some questions. Not over the phone, Foster said quickly. And not at your house. They're watching you. Meet me tomorrow morning, 6 a.m., at the Lincoln Memorial in D.C. Come alone. Don't tell anyone where you're going. And General, be careful. These people don't play games. They've already killed to keep this secret. They won't hesitate to kill again." The line went dead. Marcus did not sleep at all that night. He lay in bed staring at the ceiling, his mind racing through possibilities and dangers. Foster's warning echoed in his head. They've already killed to keep this secret. Was he walking into a trap? Should he tell Jim or Elena where he was going? But Foster had been explicit. Come alone. At 4 in the morning, Marcus gave up on sleep and got dressed. He chose dark clothes, nothing that would draw attention. He wrote another note for Sarah, this one vaguer than the last. Just said he had some business to take care of and would be back by afternoon. He knew she would worry if she called and he did not answer, but he could not risk telling her the truth. The less she knew, the safer she would be. The drive to Washington, D.C. took 3 hours. Marcus left at 4:30, while it was still dark, and watched his rearview mirror constantly. He did not see anyone following him, but that did not mean they were not there. Professional surveillance teams knew how to stay invisible. He arrived at the Lincoln Memorial at 5:45, parking several blocks away and walking in. The memorial was quiet at this hour, just a few joggers and early morning tourists. Marcus climbed the steps and stood looking at the massive statue of Lincoln, feeling small and insignificant in comparison. He thought about leadership, about the burden of command, about the weight of decisions that cost lives. Lincoln had sent hundreds of thousands of men to their deaths in the Civil War, but he had done it for a cause, for principles. Marcus wondered what cause had justified the deaths on Operation Jackal. At exactly 6 a.m., Foster appeared. He looked different than Marcus remembered. Thinner, older, with a haunted look in his eyes. He wore a baseball cap pulled low and sunglasses despite the early hour. He climbed the steps slowly and stood next to Marcus without looking at him. "Thank you for coming," Marcus said quietly. "I almost didn't, Rhodes," Foster replied. "I've spent 13 years trying to forget that mission, trying to move on with my life. And now you show up asking questions, dragging it all back up." "I'm sorry," Marcus said, "but I think you know this can't stay buried forever. Too many people died, and I'm finding out that the mission I authorized was not what I thought it was." Foster was quiet for a long moment. "What do you know so far?" Marcus told him about meeting Elena Reeves, about the tattoo, about Sara Castellano, and the cover-up of her death. He told him about the surveillance, about Jim's theory that Jackal had been a front for an intelligence operation. Foster listened without interrupting, his jaw clenched tight. When Marcus finished, Foster let out a long breath. "You're right. About all of it. The mission was compromised from the start. We were set up." "Tell me everything," Marcus said. Foster glanced around, checking to make sure no one was close enough to overhear. "The briefing we got was garbage. Vague intel, last-minute changes, incomplete information about the terrain and the enemy presence in the area. As a team leader, I tried to push back, tried to get better intel before we deployed. But I was told the mission was time-sensitive, that we had to move immediately. That should have been my first warning sign." "What about Castellano? When did you find out she was coming with you?" 48 hours before deployment, Foster said. "I got a message saying an intelligence officer was being attached to the mission. I was told she would be carrying sensitive materials that needed to be delivered to the extraction point. I was not told what the materials were, just that my job was to protect her and make sure the package reached its destination." "You met with her before the mission?" Foster nodded. "Briefly. She seemed terrified, completely out of her element. She was an analyst, not a field operative. She told me privately that she had been ordered to do this, that she had tried to refuse but was threatened with court-martial if she did not comply. She said the data she was carrying was explosive, that it could destroy careers and maybe even governments if it got out." Marcus felt a chill. "Did she tell you what was in the data?" "No. She said it was better if I didn't know. She said the less any of us knew, the safer we would be. But she was crying when she said it, General. This woman knew she was being sent to her death." "And you still took the mission?" Foster's face darkened. "I was following orders. What was I supposed to do? Refuse a direct command? I had 17 soldiers depending on me. I thought if I did everything right, if I was careful and professional, we could complete the mission and get everyone home safe. He laughed bitterly. I was so naive. Tell me about the ambush. Foster closed his eyes, and Marcus could see him reliving it. We inserted at 0300, moved through the mountains toward the extraction point. Everything was quiet, too quiet. I kept telling my men to stay alert, that something felt wrong. And then at 0547, all hell broke loose. We got hit from 3 sides simultaneously. The enemy had machine guns, RPGs, mortars. It was coordinated, professional. This was not some ragtag insurgent group. This was a trained military force. What happened to Castellano? She went down in the first 30 seconds. The enemy concentrated their fire on her position specifically. My men tried to reach her, tried to provide covering fire, but the enemy had the high ground and superior numbers. By the time we fought our way to her position, she was dead, and the case she had been carrying was gone, just gone. Someone had taken it in the middle of the firefight. And the 5 men who died? Foster's voice broke. They died trying to recover her body and the case. They died following my orders to secure the objective. Brennan, Ramirez, Chen, O'Malley, Garza. Good men, all of them. They trusted me to lead them, and I led them into a massacre. It was not your fault, Marcus said firmly. You were given bad intel and sent into a trap. The people responsible are the ones who set up the mission, not you. Doesn't make them any less dead, Foster said. After we extracted, after we got back to base, I tried to report what happened. I tried to tell my superiors that the mission had been compromised, that someone had leaked our position to the enemy. But I was shut down immediately. I was told to keep my mouth shut, that the mission was classified and I was not to discuss it with anyone. When I pushed back, when I demanded an investigation, I was told I could either accept a transfer to a different unit or face disciplinary action for insubordination. Who told you this? Colonel Richard Vance. He was the intelligence liaison at the base. He's the one who briefed us on Jackal. And he's the one who threatened me after. Marcus made a mental note of the name. Where is Vance now? That's the thing, General. He retired 2 years after Jackal with full honors. No investigation, no questions asked. Last I heard, he was working for a private intelligence firm in Maryland, making big money, living the good life, while the men who died on his mission are rotting in the ground. We need to confront him, Marcus said. We need to make him tell us who ordered the mission, who compromised it. Foster shook his head. You think he's going to just confess? He's protected, General. These people have been covering this up for 13 years. They have money, power, connections. We're just 2 old soldiers asking questions. They'll destroy us if we get too close. Then we need to be smarter than them, Marcus said. We need to gather evidence. Build a case they can't deny. I have someone working on getting the classified files. I have Elena Reeves compiling testimony from other survivors. And now I have your account of what happened. We're getting closer to the truth. Foster looked at him with something between pity and respect. You really think you can beat them? You really think you can take down whatever organization is behind this? I have to try, Marcus said simply. Because if I don't, then Sarah Castellano and those 5 soldiers died for nothing. And I won't accept that. Foster reached into his jacket and pulled out a small USB drive. This is everything I've kept from the mission. My personal notes, photographs, communications, logs. I've held on to it all these years, not sure what to do with it. Maybe it'll help you. Marcus took the drive carefully. Thank you. This could be the evidence we need. There's something else you should know, Foster said. About 3 months ago, I got a visit. 2 men in suits said they were from the Defense Department. They asked me about Jackal, about what I remembered, about whether I had talked to anyone. I lied, told them I barely remembered anything, that it was just another mission. But they knew I was lying. One of them told me that it would be unfortunate if anything happened to my family, said I should be very careful about who I spoke to and what I said. That's why I didn't want to meet Elena Reeves. I was afraid of what they might do to my wife and kids if I talked. They threatened your family? Implicitly, yeah. Nothing you could prove in court, but the message was clear. Keep your mouth shut, or people you love will get hurt. Marcus felt rage building in his chest. These people had not just covered up deaths, they were actively threatening anyone who tried to expose the truth. I'll make sure your family is protected. I still have friends in high places, people I trust. I'll arrange security. Will you? Foster asked. Because I'm betting that whoever is behind this has friends in even higher places. How do you know who to trust? It was a fair question, and Marcus did not have a good answer. I'll figure it out. Just please, don't run. Don't disappear. I might need you to testify when this all comes out. Foster nodded reluctantly. All right, but if anything happens to my family, if they get hurt because I talked to you, I'll never forgive you. Understood, Marcus said. Be careful going home. Watch for surveillance. Change your routines. They parted ways without shaking hands, Foster walking down the steps and disappearing into the growing crowd of mourning tourists. Marcus stayed at the memorial for a few more minutes, the USB drive heavy in his pocket. He thought about Colonel Richard Vance, the man who had threatened Foster and likely played a key role in the cover-up. Finding Vance was now a priority. Marcus pulled out his phone and called Jim. I just met with Foster. He confirmed everything. The mission was a setup. Castellano knew she was being sent to die, and there's a colonel named Richard Vance who threatened Foster into silence. We need to find Vance. I'm already on it, Jim said. I got the personnel records an hour ago. Vance retired in 2013 and now works for Greystone Global, a private intelligence contractor. They do work for the CIA, the Pentagon, and various other three-letter agencies. He's a senior analyst there, pulling in close to $500,000 a year. Where is he based? Bethesda, Maryland, about 30 minutes from where you are now. Marcus made a decision. I'm going to see him. Today. Right now. That's not smart, Marcus. You should wait. Plan this out. If he's involved in the cover-up, confronting him alone could be dangerous. I don't care, Marcus said. Every day we wait is another day these people get away with murder. I'm going to look Vance in the eye and make him tell me the truth. At least take Elena with you, Jim said. Strength in numbers. No. If something goes wrong, I don't want her caught up in it. Just send me Vance's address. And Jim, if something does go wrong, make sure the truth gets out. Make sure people know what happened on Operation Jackal. There was a pause. You're scaring me, Marcus. Don't do anything stupid. I'm 62 years old. I've lived a good life. I've got nothing left to lose except my integrity, and I'm not going to lose that by staying silent. Jim sent the address, and Marcus drove to Bethesda. Greystone Global had offices in a modern glass building near the hospital district. Marcus parked in the visitor lot and walked into the lobby, which was all marble and chrome, designed to impress. A security guard at the desk looked up as he approached. I'm here to see Colonel Richard Vance, Marcus said. Do you have an appointment? No, but tell him General Marcus Hartwell needs to speak with him about Operation Jackal. He'll know what that means. The guard looked uncertain but picked up his phone and made a call. There was a brief conversation, and then the guard hung up and looked at Marcus with surprise. Mr. Vance will see you. 6th floor, Suite 602. Marcus took the elevator up, his heart pounding. He did not know what to expect. Would Vance deny everything? Would he call security? Would he be hostile or cooperative? The elevator doors opened and Marcus found Suite 602 at the end of a long hallway. He knocked once and a voice called for him to enter. The office was spacious and well-appointed, with a view of the city. Behind a large desk sat a man in his early 60s, fit and tan, wearing an expensive suit. He stood as Marcus entered, and there was something calculating in his expression. General Hartwell, Vance said, not offering to shake hands. This is unexpected. Please, sit down. Marcus sat in the chair across from the desk, keeping his posture straight and alert. I think you know why I'm here. Vance smiled, but it did not reach his eyes. I assume this is about the old mission, the one we're not supposed to talk about. I'm talking about it anyway, Marcus said. I want to know what really happened. I want to know why Sara Castellano was sent on that mission and why her death was covered up. I want to know who compromised the operation and got 6 people killed. Vance leaned back in his chair, steepling his fingers. Those are very serious allegations, General, and very dangerous questions to be asking. Are you threatening me? I'm warning you, Vance said calmly. You're meddling in things you don't understand. Things that go far beyond one mission in Afghanistan. Operation Jackal was part of a larger strategy, a necessary operation that had unfortunate consequences, but it served its purpose. Its purpose was to get people killed, Marcus said, his voice rising. Its purpose was to send a woman to her death carrying classified data that was deliberately leaked to the enemy? Vance's expression hardened. Lieutenant Castellano knew what she was signing up for. She was read into the operation, briefed on the risks, and she accepted them. What happened to her was unfortunate, but it was also necessary for national security. Necessary how? Explain to me how sending soldiers into an ambush serves national security. Vance stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the city. The data Castellano was carrying contained false intelligence, deliberately crafted to mislead enemy actors. The plan was for the enemy to intercept it, to believe the false information, and to act on it, which they did. The mission was a success, General, even though there were casualties. Marcus felt like he had been punched in the stomach. You're saying the entire mission was a deception operation? That Castellano and my soldiers were sacrificed to deliver false intelligence to the enemy? I'm saying that wars are won through intelligence as much as through combat, Vance said. Sometimes sacrifices are necessary. The information the enemy obtained from Castellano led them to make strategic mistakes that ultimately saved thousands of lives. The 5 soldiers who died, and Castellano herself, they died for a greater cause. Did they know they were being sacrificed? Did they volunteer for a suicide mission? Vance turned to face him. Of course not. The operation required operational security at the highest level. Only a handful of people knew the true objective. You weren't one of them, General, because we needed your reactions to be genuine. We needed you to run the mission as if it were real, because any deviation would have tipped off the enemy that something was wrong. Marcus stood up, his hands shaking with rage. You used me. You used my command authority to send soldiers to their deaths without their knowledge or consent. That's murder, Vance. That's not strategy. It's murder. It's war, Vance said coldly. And in war, people die. I didn't make the rules, General. I just follow them. And I suggest you do the same. The operation was authorized at the highest levels, signed off by people with more stars on their shoulders than you ever had. If you try to expose this, you'll be going up against the entire intelligence apparatus of the United States government. You'll lose, and you'll destroy your reputation in the process. I don't care about my reputation, Marcus said. I care about the truth, and I care about making sure the families of those soldiers know what really happened. Vance moved quickly, reaching into his desk drawer. For a heart-stopping moment, Marcus thought he was pulling a weapon, but instead, Vance pulled out a thick manila folder and tossed it onto the desk. Go ahead, Vance said. Open it. Marcus picked up the folder and opened it. Inside were photographs. Photos of his house, his car, his wife Sarah. Photos of Elena Reeves outside her apartment. Photos of Jim meeting with Marcus at the diner. There were also documents, financial records, medical records, personal communications. We've been watching all of you, Vance said. We know about Elena Reeves and her investigation. We know about Jim Cordova and his attempts to access classified files. We know about your meeting with Foster this morning at the Lincoln Memorial. We know everything, General. And if you continue down this path, we will use everything in that folder to destroy you. We'll expose financial irregularities that don't exist. We'll manufacture evidence of security violations. We'll make sure you and everyone helping you ends up in prison, or worse. Marcus felt sick, but he forced himself to stay calm. So that's it? You're going to threaten and intimidate us into silence? We're going to protect national security, Vance said. That's our job. And if protecting national security means keeping you quiet, then yes, we'll do whatever is necessary. But it doesn't have to be adversarial, General. Walk away. Forget about Operation Jackal. Tell Elena Reeves and Jim Cordova to do the same. Go back to your quiet retirement, enjoy your grandchildren, and let the past stay buried. We're willing to let this go if you are. And if I'm not willing? Marcus asked. Vance's expression turned cold. Then you'll find out just how unpleasant life can become for people who threaten national security. Your pension will be revoked. Your wife's medical records will be leaked to the press. Jim Cordova will lose his security clearance and his consulting contracts. Elena Reeves will have an unfortunate accident. We have the resources and the authority to make all of your lives very difficult, General. Don't test us. Marcus stared at Vance for a long moment. Then he carefully closed the folder and set it back on the desk. You know what the worst part of all this is? I spent 30 years serving this country. I believed in what I was doing. I believed I was protecting people, defending freedom, fighting for something bigger than myself. And now I find out that people like you have been using that service, using that belief, to justify murder and cover-ups. You've turned everything I believed in into a lie. The world is more complicated than you think, General, Vance said. Good and evil aren't as clear-cut as they teach you at West Point. Sometimes you have to do terrible things to prevent even more terrible things from happening. That's the burden of leadership. No, Marcus said quietly. The burden of leadership is taking responsibility for your decisions. It's being honest about the costs and the sacrifices. It's treating the people under your command with dignity and respect, not as expendable pawns in some secret game. You've failed at that, Vance. And so has everyone else who was involved in Operation Jackal. He turned and walked toward the door. Vance called after him. Think carefully about your next steps, General. You have 48 hours to make a decision. Either you and your friends walk away, or we take action. Your choice. Marcus left without responding. He took the elevator down and walked out to his car, his mind racing. He had gotten more information than he expected, but he had also confirmed his worst fears. Operation Jackal had been a deliberate sacrifice, a deception operation that cost 6 lives, and the people responsible were still in power, still making decisions, still willing to kill to keep their secrets. He sat in his car for a few minutes, trying to decide what to do. Then he called Elena and Jim, told them both to meet him at a new location, a park on the outskirts of the city where they could talk without being overheard. Both of them agreed to come immediately. When they arrived an hour later, Marcus told them everything. About Foster's account, about Vance's confession, about the threats and the surveillance. Elena listened with growing fury, her hands clenched into fists. Jim looked grim but not surprised. So they're giving us an ultimatum, Jim said. Walk away or face the consequences. That's about the size of it, Marcus confirmed. What do you want to do? Elena asked, and there was something dangerous in her voice. Marcus thought about it. He thought about Sarah Castellano and Daniel Reeves. He thought about the 5 soldiers whose families had been lied to. He thought about his 30 years of service and what it all meant. And he thought about the choice Vance had given him: stay silent and keep his comfortable life, or speak up and lose everything. I want to expose them, Marcus said. I want the truth to come out, no matter what it costs me personally. But I won't force you two to make the same choice. This is your decision. If you want to walk away, I'll understand. I'm not walking away, Elena said immediately. I've come too far to give up now. Whatever you need, I'm with you. Jim was quiet for a longer moment. You realize if we do this, we're effectively going to war with the intelligence community? They have resources we can't match. They can destroy us. I know, Marcus said, but we have something they don't. We have the truth. And I'm betting that if we can get that truth out to the right people, to journalists or politicians who aren't compromised, we can force an investigation. We can make enough noise that they can't just bury this again. How do we do that? Jim asked. Marcus pulled out the USB drive Foster had given him. We start by copying everything we have and distributing it to multiple sources. Journalists, lawyers, former military officers we trust. We make sure the information can't be silenced, even if they silence us. Then we go public. Press conference, media interviews, whatever it takes. We tell the story of Operation Jackal, and we dare them to deny it. Elena nodded slowly. It might work. If we move fast enough, if we get the information out before they can stop us, the sheer publicity might protect us. They can't make all of us disappear without raising too many questions. It's risky, Jim said. Very risky. But I think you're right that it's our best shot. All right, I'm in. Let's do this. They spent the next 4 hours planning. Jim had contacts at several major newspapers and news networks. Elena had compiled extensive documentation that could be shared with journalists. Marcus drafted a statement explaining Operation Jackal and the cover-up. naming names, including Colonel Vance. They copied all their files onto multiple drives and mailed them to different locations with instructions to open them if anything happened to the three of them. It was their insurance policy, their guarantee that even if Vance and his people tried to stop them, the truth would still come out. By evening, they were ready. Jim made the first call, to a journalist he had known for 20 years at the Washington Post. Marcus called a senator on the Armed Services Committee, someone he had worked with during his military career. Elena reached out to a lawyer who specialized in whistleblower cases. Within 2 hours, they had secured a meeting with the Post journalist for the next morning. The senator's office said they would review the information and get back to them. The lawyer was interested but wanted to see the documentation first. It was happening. The truth was starting to come out. Marcus felt a mixture of relief and terror. He knew Vance and his people would react, probably violently, but it was too late to turn back now. He went home that night and called Sarah in Boston. He told her he loved her, told her she might see some disturbing news stories in the next few days, but that everything would be okay. He didn't tell her about the threats or the danger. He wanted her to stay in Boston, stay safe, stay out of the line of fire. At midnight, his phone rang. Unknown number again. He answered. General Hartwell? The voice was mechanical, distorted. This is your final warning. Stop what you're doing. Cancel your meetings. Destroy the evidence. Walk away. I can't do that, Marcus said. Then you leave us no choice. What happens next is on you. The line went dead. Marcus sat in his dark living room, phone in hand, waiting. He didn't know what was coming, but he knew it would be soon. At 2 a.m, his doorbell rang. Marcus approached carefully, looking through the peephole. There were 2 police officers on his porch. He opened the door cautiously. General Hartwell, one of them said. Yes? We need you to come with us, sir. There's been an incident involving Elena Reeves. She listed you as an emergency contact. Marcus's blood went cold. What happened? Is she okay? There was a fire at her apartment building. She's being treated for smoke inhalation at the hospital. She's asking for you. Marcus grabbed his jacket and followed the officers to their squad car. As they drove to the hospital, he tried calling Elena's phone. No answer. He tried Jim. No answer. Alarm bells were ringing in his head, but what could he do? If Elena was really hurt, he had to check on her. They arrived at the hospital and the officers escorted him inside, but instead of taking him to the emergency room, they led him to a secluded hallway on the 3rd floor. That's when Marcus knew something was wrong. He turned to run, but more men had appeared behind him. Not police officers, men in dark suits with earpieces. They grabbed him, one on each arm, and dragged him into an empty room. Colonel Vance was waiting there, along with 2 other men Marcus didn't recognize. I'm sorry it had to come to this, General, Vance said. We gave you a chance to walk away. You should have taken it. Where's Elena? Marcus demanded. What did you do to her? Miss Reeves is fine. There was no fire. We just needed to get you here without making a scene. As for what we're going to do, Vance gestured to one of the men, who pulled out a syringe filled with clear liquid. You're going to have a stroke, General. Very sad, very tragic. A man your age, with your stress levels, it was only a matter of time. Your wife will be heartbroken, but at least it will be quick and painless. Marcus tried to struggle, but the men holding him were too strong. He watched in horror as the man with the syringe approached. And then the door burst open. Elena Reeves stood there, gun drawn, pointed directly at Vance's head. Let him go, she said, her voice deadly calm. Right now, or I put a bullet in your brain. Behind her, Marcus could see Jim and 2 other men, also armed. They must have been watching, waiting for Vance to make his move. The men holding Marcus hesitated. Vance looked at Elena with something between anger and respect. You're making a mistake, Vance said. You can't win this fight. Maybe not, Elena said, but I can sure as hell take you down with me. Now let him go. The men released Marcus. He stumbled forward, Elena catching him with her free arm while keeping the gun trained on Vance. We're leaving, Elena said. And if any of your people try to follow us, if anything happens to any of us, everything we know goes public. Every document, every recording, every piece of evidence. It all goes to every major news outlet in the country. Your choice, Vance. Let us walk out of here, or watch your entire operation collapse. Vance stared at her for a long moment. Then, incredibly, he smiled. You've got courage, I'll give you that. All right, you walk. But this isn't over, not by a long shot. Yes it is, Marcus said, finding his voice. Because tomorrow morning, we're meeting with the Washington Post. And by tomorrow afternoon, Operation Jackal is going to be front-page news. Your threats don't work anymore, Vance. The truth is coming out, and there's nothing you can do to stop it. They backed out of the room, weapons still drawn, and made their way out of the hospital. Jim had a car waiting. They drove in silence for 10 minutes, making sure they weren't being followed. Finally, Elena lowered her gun and let out a shaky breath. That was too close. How did you know? Marcus asked. Jim had a bad feeling when those cops showed up. We followed you to the hospital and saw them taking you to the wrong floor. We moved as fast as we could. Marcus looked at them both. These two people who had risked their lives to save his? Thank you. I thought I was done for. We're not done yet, Jim said. We still have to get through tomorrow. Get the story published. Vance is right that this isn't over. They're going to keep coming after us. Let them come, Elena said fiercely. I'm done hiding. I'm done being afraid. Whatever happens from here, at least Sarah and my brother and all the others will finally get justice. The next morning, they met with the Washington Post journalist in a secure location. They spent 6 hours going through every document, every piece of evidence. The journalist, a veteran investigative reporter named Sarah Chen, asked tough questions but seemed convinced by what she was seeing. This is huge, she finally said. If everything you're telling me is true, this is going to shake the entire intelligence community. But I need to verify some of these claims, talk to other sources. It's going to take me at least a week to put the story together properly. We might not have a week, Marcus said. The people involved are going to try to stop this. Then we move fast, Chen said. I'll have a preliminary story ready in 48 hours. Basic facts, your allegations, Vance's involvement. It won't be the complete picture, but it'll be enough to force an investigation. That's all we need, Elena said. Once the investigation starts, they can't bury it again. 2 days later, the story broke. Whistleblowers allege cover-up of botched Afghanistan mission, read the headline. The article detailed the deaths on Operation Jackal, the disappearance of Sara Castellano from official records, and allegations of a deliberate deception operation that sacrificed American lives. The response was immediate and explosive. Within hours, the Pentagon was issuing denials. The Senate Armed Services Committee announced an investigation. News networks picked up the story, running with it on their evening broadcasts. Marcus, Elena, and Jim found themselves suddenly famous, or infamous depending on who was asked. Colonel Vance issued a statement through Greystone Global, denying all allegations and threatening legal action. But more and more former soldiers came forward with their own stories, their own suspicions about missions that had gone wrong. The cracks in the cover-up were widening. 3 weeks later, the Senate investigation was in full swing. Marcus testified, as did Elena, Jim, and Captain Foster. Documents were subpoenaed. Witnesses were called. The truth was finally coming out. Vance was arrested on charges of conspiracy and obstruction of justice. Several other intelligence officials were placed under investigation. The families of the soldiers who died on Operation Jackal were briefed on what really happened, given closure after 13 years of lies. Sara Castellano was posthumously awarded the Intelligence Star for her service and sacrifice. Her name was added to the memorial wall at CIA headquarters, no longer erased from history. Daniel Reeves was honored by his military unit, recognized as a veteran who had served with distinction and struggled with the aftermath of an impossible mission. Marcus stood at Arlington National Cemetery on a cold November morning, looking at the fresh gravestone that had been placed for Sara Castellano, even though her body was long gone. Elena stood next to him, tears running down her face. "We did it," she said quietly. "We got them justice." "We did," Marcus agreed, "but it cost us. It cost all of us." And it had. Marcus's reputation had taken a beating from those who saw him as a traitor to the intelligence community. His pension was under review. Sarah had stood by him, but their quiet retirement was shattered forever. Elena had lost her apartment, her savings, and nearly her life. But she had found peace, or something close to it. Jim had lost his security clearance and his consulting contracts, but he said it was worth it. They had all paid a price for the truth. But as Marcus looked at Sarah Castellano's name engraved in stone, no longer forgotten, no longer erased, he knew they had made the right choice. Some secrets needed to stay buried. But not this one. Never this one. The dead deserved better. And now, finally, they had received it.